Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. The year is coming to an end very quickly, and so it is time for my top 5 books of 2015 video. I did one of these last year. I will link to it below. This one is coming a little bit earlier than it did last year, but that is mostly because I am still barreling through the last of the 50 book reading challenge books for the Pop Sugar Challenge, and so I wanted to do my December wrap-ups really way at the end so that I can try to finish all of them before I record that video. These books are in no particular order. The first book that I wanted to talk about is not going to be a huge surprise. It is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I mentioned this in my review. It was a joint review of Uprooted and Darkest Part of the Forest, that this would probably be in my top 5 of 2015, and it absolutely was. This is a beautiful book. It is a standalone retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It also draws from, I believe, Polish folklore. The names are very Eastern European, which means that I am not very good at pronouncing them. So it is about 2 girls living in a small town near the Wood, which is a malevolent, evil force that like corrupts people and, you know, corrupts land and crops and just sort of pollutes everything. And the dragon, who is the magician that theoretically is trying to protect them from the Wood, but he also every 10 years will take a girl from one of the villages and they live in his tower for 10 years, and then after those 10 years they are released, but they usually go off into like a big city and they sort of forget how to live in their little town and so end up just having lives outside. And so the main girl, Agnieszka, knows that her best friend Kasia is going to be the one chosen, and everyone has sort of known this forever because Kasia is beautiful and kind and a wonderful dancer and, you know, all of those kinds of things that the girls that are taken usually are. And then, of course, since Agnieszka is the main character, she is chosen instead, which kicks off a whole series of events. Agnieszka realizes that she has some magic powers that she wasn't really aware of, and there's some things about the woods gathering power and encroaching on, you know, more and more into the towns. It was just wonderful. I loved this book so much. I loved the relationship between Agnieszka and Kasia, how they were just each other's most important person and how that never faltered throughout all of these other things that they've had to deal with and they've had to sort of come to terms with about their relationship. As well as I thought the magic system was really beautiful and wonderful in this system, and the wood was really creepy and eerie and malevolent, so I just thought that this book was fantastic. The next one on here is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sainz. I'm still not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This book took me completely by surprise. I did not expect to like it as much as I did, and it just swept me away. I adored it. It is about 2 boys living in El Paso. They are both Mexican-American. Their names are Aristotle and Dante. Aristotle is the point of view character, and he meets Dante at the public pool over the summer, and they form a friendship. Dante ends up teaching him how to swim. It all takes place in the late 80s, so that is kind of an interesting, almost period piece aspect to it. It's hard for me to talk about the plot of this one because there actually isn't a ton of plot. The book is somewhat slow and quiet and tends to just have a lot of like soft, quiet moments that end up building into something greater. Aristotle is a really lovely main character. He's sweet and lonely and kind of sad, but he is just very loving towards his family and towards his friends. He's also dealing with the fact that his older brother, he was maybe like 12 or 15 years older than him, is in prison and will now probably be in prison for life, and they don't ever really talk about it in his family, and, you know, like all of the pictures have been put away and just no one says anything about it, and he really misses his brother because his brother, you know, looked after him when he was little. And so there's a lot of things going on in his life that make him sort of quiet and reserved, but he's very sweet and he's very caring. And I was a little bit concerned because I know that this is about 2 LGBT kids in El Paso in the late 80s, that it was going to be, you know, really depressing, but it actually wasn't. It had a very, you know, it was a struggle to sort of get to this good place, but they do end in a place that is hopeful. And so that was a thing that was really key for me, was that this is not a downer of a book. This next one that I wanted to talk about is one that I mentioned in my most recent video, which was the November wrap-up. It is sort of cheating because it is a play, and I don't think it's actually technically been released in book form, but it is Hamilton. I will put a picture of the cast album recording here, but it's just fantastic. I'm just still in love with it. I re-listened to it a couple times, and just each time you find more things in it, and it's just so good. It is about Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers. He was the first Treasury Secretary of the United States. That sounds kind of weird as like a subject for a musical, especially one done in like R&B, hip hop, and rap style, but it is just amazing. It is written and stars Lin-Manuel Miranda. And one of the things that I really love about this musical, and one of the reasons that I think book lovers will really love this musical, is that a lot of the sort of drive of the play is based on legacy and narrative. Like, one of the lines that repeats is "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?" And so a lot of it is about the power of narrative. And that's just something that I find really rewarding to explore. You know, who tells your story? Do you get to tell your own? And there's just a lot of human emotion in it, and it makes the founding of our country come alive in a way that I didn't really expect. Alexander Hamilton is a figure that has not exactly been forgotten, but he's sort of relegated as to kind of a footnote. You know, he was first Treasury Secretary and killed in a duel with Aaron Burr are kind of the only things that, if people know who he is, that's kind of all they know. Also that he's on the face of the $10 bill. And so this play sort of brings him to life, and it also brings some other people that were around him that I didn't really know anything about to life. You know, like Hercules Mulligan is one of them, John Laurens is another one. John Laurens fought with him in the Revolutionary War and died in battle. His wife, Eliza Hamilton, her sister, Angelica Schuyler, I didn't know about any of these people, really. I think maybe I knew a little bit about Elizabeth because I think I learned about the orphanage that she founded, but other than that, nothing. So I think that this musical does an absolutely wonderful job of bringing that part of American history to life, and I think that it also does a really wonderful job of exploring the idea of legacy and storytelling. Number 4 on the list of my top 5 books / series for this year is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. The first one is The Raven Boys, and then it is followed by The Dream Thieves, and then Blue Lily Lily Blue. The Raven King is coming out in 2016. I am thrilled. I am so excited to read it. This is actually the only series that I have this year. Everything else is basically a standalone. And I hesitated to put this on here because it is unfinished, and I generally like to wait until a whole series wraps up to decide how I feel about the arc as a whole. But I love this series so much that I couldn't leave it off. So to give you a brief recap on what the sort of premise of the story is, there are 5 main characters, which the first one is Blue Sargent, who is the only non-psychic girl living in a house of all psychics. But what she can do is she can sort of amplify or act as a conduit for psychic ability. So she's often present during their readings and things like that. And at the beginning of the series, she is going out with her aunt to see basically there's a procession that happens once a year for people with psychic ability. They can see sort of the souls of the people who are going to die in the following year. And so basically they write down who has proceeded past them so that they can decide, you know, who to warn and stuff like that. And Blue has never been able to see any of these apparitions. She's just basically there to help her relatives see them. But in this particular case, she does. She sees one of them, his name is Gansey, and when she asks her aunt what this means, it means that either he is Blue's true love, or she kills him. Adding on to this, the fact that Blue has had a curse on her since birth, which is that when she kisses her true love, they'll die. So this is a recipe for disaster. The other 4 main characters are the aforementioned Raven Boys. They are Gansey, Richard Gansey III, I believe, is his full name, which is why he goes by Gansey. There is Ronan, who is Gansey's oldest friend. He is a very angry, troubled person, and his dad has died years before the book series starts. There is Adam, who is one of the only poor boys in this group because they go to a very prestigious private school. Most of the characters are rich. Blue is not. So he is working on a partial scholarship and part-time jobs, and he has a lot of pride tied up in his ability to take care of everything himself, which is sometimes misplaced, which we will get to later. And then Noah is the final one, who is known as the smudgy one, and just is kind of fading into the background, and there's a reason for that we find out later. These 4 boys are all on a sort of hero's journey quest to find the sleeping Welsh king Glendower, who has supposedly his body has been transported to Virginia, and so they are searching along ley lines, things like that. Gansey ends up going to Blue Sergeant's house to get some assistance. And that is basically how they end up joining forces, and Blue ends up getting adopted into this group of boys. And basically their group is sort of codependent, but in a way that really, really works for me, and I just love all of them, and I think that the writing is lyrical and beautiful. Like, I will just sometimes be reading and a sentence will just sort of catch me and I'll just be sort of taken by surprise by it, and it's just absolutely stunning. I think that probably that aspect of it works better or worse depending on your personal taste. So I personally loved it. I've loved this whole series. I love the sensibility that she has in this series. Like, it feels socially aware in a way that you wouldn't necessarily always expect. Like, Gansey is very privileged and he is aware of it, and he does his best to, you know, not hurt people, but that doesn't mean that he always succeeds. And so it's this pull where you have these characters that love each other so much, but that doesn't mean that they never hurt each other, and so they have to work through that. Like, there's a moment where Gansey is visiting Adam, and Adam lives basically in a trailer park, and he's looking around and he notices all of the dead grass, and he realizes that, you know, of course their grass is dead because it costs money to water lawns. And he has that moment where it's an obvious conclusion, but he'd never made it before. He has the thought of, oh, of course beauty costs money. And, you know, the way that he's always sort of trying to better himself, but because of his privileged upbringing, he just has a lot of work to do, and he's sort of aware of that, and he does the best that he can, and I think that that's really admirable. The final book that I wanted to talk about this year is one that I just recently finished. I mentioned it as a book I was about to read in my last video. It is Grace Keepers by Kirsty Logan. This one I basically only picked up because of the Pop Sugar 50 Book Reading Challenge, because one of the categories was read an author with your same initials. And I was having a lot of trouble finding anything that didn't look like I would want to claw my own eyes out rather than read it. And I am so glad that I picked this one up, because it is weird, but in a way that really worked for me, and I was not expecting it. It's set in a world that is theoretically, I think, supposed to be ours, but it's so far removed from ours that the question of whether or not it was originally our world is kind of non-existent anymore. Like, it just doesn't matter, which is basically the whole world has been covered by water except for some islands. So society has basically divided into landlockers and damplings depending on where you live. And there are two main characters in the book, although there are a few other characters that get brief point of view chapters. One of the main characters is North, who is the bear girl in a traveling boat circus, and the other one is Callanish, who basically works as a mortician for the damplings, but she's also considered sort of like a holy hermit. So she lives on this island all by herself. She's brought, you know, regular supply ships, and then the damplings bring their dead to her so that she can perform the ritual to lay them to rest. And they're all buried at sea, obviously. There's no land to bury them in. So Callanish and North have sort of two parallel storylines going, and then they do eventually meet when the circus has to bring a body to Callanish to lay them to rest, and her and North meet and have this instant moment of connection, because Callanish was born with webbing between her fingers and toes, and North is pregnant carrying a child that may turn out the same as Callanish, because it turns out that they might both have a sort of supernatural father. So there's elements of folklore to it, there's elements of magical realism to it. It is beautiful and, like I said, kind of weird, but in a way that just really worked for me. And Callanish and North's connection was really strong, and basically Callanish ends up sort of going on a journey to get North back in her life, and it was just absolutely lovely. And every time that I picked it up and started reading it, I didn't want to put it back down. I don't think that this book will be for everyone, but it just worked for me. You know, I love circuses, I love magical realism, I love girls going on hero's journey quests to go find other girls. All of those things are pretty much exactly what I'm looking for in a novel, so this one just worked for me wonderfully. So that is it for my top 5 books of 2015. I will still be putting up my December wrap-up video as usual next week. Please let me know if you've read any of these down in the comments, and I will see you guys very soon with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!